Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. Dr. Drew Brannon, joined by Dr. Cory Shaffer, who's wearing a pretty sweet pair of Jordans today. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
I
always try to bring it on podcast days.
I'm not sure that our listeners can really get a full sense for what they are, so maybe that's my way of suggesting they go check out the YouTube channel.
All right. Little plug. I like that.
Yep. We are on the YouTube. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel. And if you do that, you'll get a chance to check out Dr. Shaffer's Jordans, which are pretty sweet.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
We're excited to be here today. This is a topic that I really enjoy this topic. I feel like we do our best to infuse it into a lot of different things that we do, whether that's teams in sports, whether that's corporations in different industries that we're working with. But Cory, the topic that we're getting into today is that of success.
Yeah, always an interesting topic. Enjoy talking about it, enjoy teaching about it. I find that it's not really something that people tend to put a ton of conscious thought into.
Yep.
And until you really press them to start thinking about it, maybe they don't realize how much of their life they're filtering through this definition of success that unfortunately makes them pretty vulnerable to feel like they're failing.
Yeah,
is probably the simplest way of putting it, but certainly something that we find a ton of value in talking about regularly. I would consider this one of our core plays. If there was an AMPLOS playbook, it would be there and probably one of the first couple of pages.
I agree with that. And I want to share one of the observations I've made over time that really strikes me every time it happens. And that is, I agree with you. Everybody out there wants to be successful. That's not like a shocking statement or a surprising statement or anything. And whether they've consciously decided it or not, they want to be successful. And yet, when I ask people the question of how do you define success or what is your definition of success, it's incredible to me how many times their response back to me is one of two things. Either they say, wow, that's a really great question. Or two, man, that's a tough question. And the way I interpret those responses is what they're telling me is they haven't really thought about it before. Like they haven't thought about it in a clear, kind of deliberate way, which the whole dynamic of that is so fascinating in that they, on the one hand, they want this really badly, but they haven't even thought about what their definition is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's complex. And I think, at least in teaching this in a more kind of formal didactic setting, just teasing it apart can be sort of complex. I think it is a topic that people can try to dive into and realize how challenging it's such a simple question. But like you said, it really forces you to, cut to the core of like, what do you think is important or how do you want to sort of view your life? Again, what lens and what filter are you looking at it through? Like, it's just hard. It's hard. It's complex. I think teasing out different things like, well, what is quote unquote success and what's a byproduct of success, for example? Like, those are questions that until you really put some thought into trying to define it for yourself, you've never really come into contact with that.
Yep. So I think maybe one other just final point to make here before we get into the bulk of our conversation is just that clarifying what is our job and what isn't our job when it comes to this topic, because we view our role and responsibility and I guess our job as the person or the people nudging you and urging you to think about this. Like we want to push you on this. We want you to feel challenged to really reflect and evaluate and ultimately land on how you think about this word. The thing that isn't our job is to tell you how to define success for you.
Yeah. Now, I think we can encourage people to do this in what I would consider the quote unquote right way.
Sure.
Like almost how to put guardrails on it to
that.
Make sure that, again, you're not leaving yourself open or vulnerable to feel, as I mentioned before, like a failure or whatever. But Yeah, I certainly agree with you. I can't tell you what your definition of success is. I can show you, and that's part of what today is about. I can show you different examples from people who you would probably objectively think to be successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I can show you a dozen different examples of how they define success.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that you take in and say, okay, I can pick up on some themes here, hopefully.
Right.
I see how these other people are doing it. Like I like this from this person or this from that person, but ultimately you still have to be the one to put pen to paper and think about your life and how you want to define it.
I think we can also warn and caution examples of how people have done this that haven't ended very well.
Sure.
And that's not the focus of today's conversation, but those are available to us. Okay, so that said, we're talking about success, and we're going to do it in this way. And I think it's a little bit unique, hopefully, for us, and hopefully unique for our listeners. And as I explain how we're going to do it, just a quick personal aside here. I had a wonderful professor in undergrad who was a mentor to me, incredible human being named Dean Thompson. He was an English professor. That was one of the things I majored in. And I think he would be really proud of this conversation today.
All right.
And here's why. So we're talking about Ralph Waldo Emerson. And Dean Thompson was the professor who taught we were talking about this before we on the air here. But I took up a class in like American literature, American transcendentalism literature, and all these courses. But like Emerson he was a Mount Rushmore. You love the Mount Rushmore thing.
Great.
He was a Mount Rushmore guy for American lit. So
like your Mount Rushmore, or you're speaking for all of people who say
he is.
Okay.
I think people who know way more about it than I do at this stage of my life and career would agree that Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you don't know who that is, brilliant, well-established, well-regarded writer of many things, poetry, novels. The guy did it all. Super talented. And I think the reason he's a good common denominator individual to talk about this topic is that in his heyday, he was famous, like extremely well regarded, highly esteemed, top of what he did, extremely successful in the world's eyes, right? And so we're going to talk through a definition of success that he wrote and offered to everyone. And what our thoughts are on it. You want to break it down? You want to read it for us?
Read it? Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
I feel like I've got the good, I don't know, you tell me, transcendentalist literature or something. All right, here we go. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you lived. This is to have succeeded. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Mount Rushmore.
Okay, so I love that, man. And we're going to get into it here and talking about it. And there's essentially, we'll spend more time on some components than others, but there are really like 9 things, I think 9 distinct elements of his definition of success.
And I think that is an important point. And this is where this conversation can be so challenging. As this guy is defining success, and we're going to talk through, each of these points, but you can look at that and go like, man, there's so much there. Yep. 9 separate points to make about what it means to be successful. And I think people look at that and they go, well, I guess I need, a baker's dozen myself to determine success in my life. And so you can see why I think sometimes this exercise or this conversation can feel so intimidating or so challenging. Is because you look at something like that and it's like, man, how eloquent, how beautiful, how awesome.
Yeah.
But then also, I'm supposed to do that.
Right. And do I need to do do I have to do all 9 to be successful?
Right.
That's a dangerous place to be.
100%.
And so I think, on the one hand, clarity is so important. But this is not intended to be an endorsement of like, you need to have your 9 factors, your 9
Please do not think that.
In order to be successful. So let's jump into these, Cory, and go through them and we'll talk about them individually and we'll talk about them thematically. But one of the first things that really jumps off the page to me that I really have an appreciation for is the fact that although at this time in his life, Emerson was, as I said, a highly respected, famous dude, for lack of a better term, so much of how he was defining success was outside of himself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really awesome thing.
There's real humility.
Yeah, exactly.
Within the definition, which is pretty cool to see.
Okay, so his first component here, to laugh often and much. What are your thoughts on the role that laughter plays in how we define success?
I suppose it's just an indicator that you're happy. If you're enjoying life, it's probably full of laughter. If you're surrounded by, good people, the quote unquote right people, you're probably enjoying life and laughing a lot and so on. The sort of age old adage of laughter keeps you young, like all of those things.
Yeah.
I think are sort of in play here. I think just personally, I think it's a cool way, a great way to start this thing off.
Yeah. Why?
Again, you set it up, right? Think about who this guy is,
mm-hmm.
and what he meant to the world and what he was contributing to the world. And yet he's starting by saying to be successful is to laugh.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're spot on. I was just curious about why you felt that way. But when I think about that beginning and I kind of put that up, let's hold that in the balance. And then side by side, I'm thinking about what a lot of the data we're seeing these days relative to burnout and engagement in the U.S. workforce. And the numbers are like all going in a direction that isn't good. So what do we see in the psychological data? Okay, burnout and stress are higher than they've ever been. We just got the most recent Gallup data on engagement, which is essentially defined as like the degree to which you are emotionally invested in what you do. And those numbers are worse than they've been in a decade. And yet my man Ralph here is saying, start with laughter.
Yep.
And so, man, there's a collision there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tension of, I'm not saying that the U.S. workforce isn't laughing. I am saying that they sure seem to be extremely stressed out, likely to burn out, and lacking emotional investment and passion in what they do.
The success and happiness conversation is really interesting. Most people tend to believe that, success needs to come first. And once I'm successful, then I can be happy. Yeah. Then I can laugh. Right.
Right.
What's interesting, we know this again from research, Dr. Sean Acor has done a lot of research in this area. Our brains actually work in the opposite direction. And meaning that if you can learn to cultivate just happiness wherever you are, sort of water the grass that you're standing on and not look over at the neighbors and assume it's greener there. As long as you can put yourself into a positive state of mind or cultivate some happiness, that our brains are actually more productive. They're better. And so we actually set ourselves up to get that quote unquote conventional success anyway. And it starts, though, by just being in a good mood and being happy, being content with where you are. So it's just interesting.
So let's be sure. I mean, I want to try to, as we get through each of these, maybe offer a little takeaway or recap to our listeners. Check yourself. Are you laughing enough? Are you finding humor in things? Or, and this is easy to do, and I'll own this certainly in my own life, it's easy to take yourself too seriously. It's easy to take your work too seriously. Mm-hmm. So be on guard against those things. Okay, what's our next one, Cory?
Yeah, so my observation here is the second pieces, the second piece through the fifth piece all have a commonality. So I'll go back and just read each of these, and then I'll open it up to you to talk about what they have in common or the theme that's present here. So number 2 is to win the respect of intelligent people. 3 is to win the affection of children. 4 is to earn the appreciation of honest critics. And 5 is to endure the betrayal of false friends. What do you got there, Doc?
Man, 5. The last one you just brought in there it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. So the theme consistent across each of those seems to be that although those are, I think, goals worth pursuing, they're outside of our immediate control.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, I don't have the ultimate ability to control whether or not people respect me. I can, on that first part there, as he says, to win the respect of intelligent people, that's great. But we don't definitively change people's minds, alter their mind. We can't do that. Same goes for the affection of children. Certainly our own, we hope to win the affection of them, earn the appreciation of honest critics, to endure the betrayal of false friends. So let's talk about that thematically, because I think what's going on there is my takeaway is live your life in a way that it is respected by others, that children find you approachable and caring, et cetera, and to even live in a way where, although critics might not call you their best friend, they have an appreciation for how you're going about your business. How do we do that well?
I mean, again, my reaction in reading this just for the very first time was like, okay, to laugh often much, like, all right,
I got that. I can do that.
And then he gets to the next one and I'm like, ooh, I don't know, Ralph, and then like earn the affection of children. Oof, I don't know, Ralph. And so these are all kind of bunched together. To be honest, I wish it would just say to laugh often and much, to strive to be a good person.
Yeah, maybe there's a part of that. That's
right.
True.
To sort of like summarize all of it. But because, I mean, these are commendable things to aspire to, but if I'm going to allow my definition of success to be dependent on these other people, again, that just leaves me vulnerable or leaves me chasing something that's out of my control.
Yeah. And maybe we just focus on the second one he put here of winning the affection of children, and thinking about what's really behind that, because kids are unique in many ways, one of which is they usually don't have any type of filter in a good way. Like, if you said you're going to do something for a kid and you don't do it, like most of them are going to nail you on that, and they should. And so I think what I'm saying is, like, they do an incredible job of keeping us honest. Mm-hmm. They do an incredible job of ensuring that we are consistently doing what we said we were going to do. It's what we always say is, kids always pay much more attention to what you do than what you say. And so there's an honest and healthy accountability system there.
Yeah, I think kids have a pretty good BS reader. My wife and I have joked about this a lot, because my niece and nephew, who absolutely love and adore her, early on when they were, like toddlers, and, they're really starting to, interact and want to play and this and that, like they would always gravitate to me over to her. Mm-hmm. And she was trying so hard to get them to like interact. Like she wanted so badly, nothing to do but like play with them. And I was like, of course I wanted that, but I just was like, hey, like it's going to be on their terms. I can't just force myself into playing with my niece and nephew. And as a result, they gravitated to me. And it frustrated her to no end, because that's so badly like what she wanted. But yeah, it's one of those things where they can almost feel when you're like trying too hard or not being genuine or whatever it might be. So yeah, to your point, I think kids do a great job of I don't filtering through junk to get to like what's really here.
They keep you honest.
Yeah, they keep you honest.
They really do. So I think that's a neat way to think about it. And then the one other one I think is worth maybe a second look here is, as he says, to endure the betrayal of false friends. And my read on that is he's offering one example of the fact that life is going to be hard and people are going to let you down. And I think as the way I read this is, it's inevitable that things are going to be difficult. People will let you down. And yet there feels to be this kind of like calling here almost of living above the fray, of continuing to, I think, treat people and your opportunities and relationships with honor and respect and integrity, and not allowing others to control you.
Yeah, the phrase that comes to mind when I read that is just peace of mind. And again, that comes back to kind of what I mentioned before, but just, hey, if you're being a good person, if you're living the ways that we've describing, um, you may or may not end up being on the bad end of something like this, right? Betrayal in this case. But to have some peace of mind in knowing that, like, hey, I'm doing everything that I can.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the way that I'm upholding my end of, relationships, and I'm intending to do the right things and striving to do the right things and so on.
Yeah. I guess the final summary on that would be, I've heard this phrase before and I kind of like it. The idea of keeping your side of the street clean,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you can control, knowing that there will be things occurring on the other side of the street that you can't necessarily do anything about. Okay, so let's move through that. Like, I agree with you. I like how you summarize that. We kind of have that cluster there of a number of things with relationships that are outside of our control. And let's go to the number 6 here: to appreciate beauty. Appreciate beauty. How does that tie into how we think about success?
Yeah, this one's interesting. And there's actually a survey that you can take, the VIA, the Values in Action survey that you can take, and it looks at these different characteristics. I think 24 character strengths, right? That, like, universally studied across the world, like these 24 character strengths, okay, have been found in all different cultures and so on. And essentially you take this short survey to determine to what degree are these strengths, like, we all have them, okay, but sort of how we're naturally inclined to them. And one of them is essentially this, like, it's the appreciation of beauty and excellence or something along those lines. It does not come natural for me. So, by the way, it's one of my lower on the list. But I think what it means is that, or how I'm interpreting it at least, okay, haven't talked to Ralph about this, but slowing down enough, let's say, to take the time to appreciate moments, or to have gratitude for just where you're at any given time.
That's the word I was kind of dialing up, is gratitude. And, I don't know, certainly have not been all around the world, but I've been enough places to recognize that there's some incredible things that we get the benefit of enjoying. And so I agree with you. I think if you are appreciating beauty, in order to do that, you do have to slow down. You do have to open up your eyes wide and put your phone down and push out some distractions and practice some degree of mindfulness and just see what's in front of you with gratitude, with excitement, realizing and knowing that there have been countless examples of people who couldn't or didn't do that. So I think that, when you take stock in those examples, and I don't mean you have to, like, go to the Grand Canyon to experience this. I mean, it's a walk through your neighborhood or early in the morning in the spring right now as the sun's coming up, and just having that appreciation of, like, wow, having the ability to say wow at the glimpses of beauty in nature is a pretty healthy way to live.
Yeah, I think the willingness first and foremost, and then the maybe an established or developed ability to really do this. I certainly think what it does is if I'm focused on just, let's say, in this case, the beauty of just kind of what's around me, having gratitude for where I'm at and what I do have, it prevents my mind from going to a place where I'm focused on what I don't have.
That too.
Right. And so I think that's a piece of this, is just, it's almost like what he's saying is, like, you're cultivating some mindfulness and some gratitude towards just, like, be where your feet are.
Yeah.
And if you can appreciate and be where your feet are, man, is it a whole lot easier to feel successful and happy in this little bubble of this moment instead of getting too caught up in, well, what don't I have? What's coming next? Like, what happened yesterday or earlier today or whatever. Like that tends to be the stuff that fills our mental space. But to sort of pause all that, or at least push it to the side and just focus on what's in front of me, to appreciate, again, beauty, excellence is the other word that I described from the VIA. I think it's interesting. It's very insightful here by your dear old friend Ralph.
But think about, and like, let's talk about some irony here for a second. In his era, he's saying, slow down. What in the world would he be saying in 2024?
Yeah, no kidding.
It's scary to think what he might be saying.
Yeah.
To us. All right, let's go to the next one here, which is to find the best in others. To find the best in others.
Yeah, so this is a great callback to, for example, to endure the betrayal of false friends. Right. And all these other ones that were more about relationships and other people, like this is within my control.
Yeah.
Can I strive to find the good or the best qualities in the people around me, regardless of how they're treating me? That's not the point. Right. I'm going to take care of my side of the street, as you mentioned earlier. This is more aligned to how, at least for us, I think our perspective and how we would teach the idea of defining success is like, this is up to me.
Yeah. But think of how counter this is right here. And look, two things, just before I say this, two things. Number one, this is not just to be a criticism of others. And number two, I'm not a huge social media person. Okay. Don't do a ton of social media, but many people are, and which is not a bad thing. But I've got a feeling that a lot of what's happening on social media is not finding the best in others.
Yeah.
When the scrolling is going on and people are seeing examples of, let's just say, maybe a person's attempts and tendencies to kind of showcase their highlights.
Yes.
I don't know that the response that they're getting from the people who are seeing this in the scroll as finding the best in them. And that's just one of many examples.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Again, what would Ralph say today? I'm not sure, but again, I don't know. At the core of this, to me, it's easy to be critical. It's easy to be judgmental.
Yeah.
We've used the line from Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. Right. I think that fits really well here. But to seek to find that. So maybe what jumps off the page, let's say, it's hard to say this objectively, but objectively is like not good. But do you have enough patience or curiosity to try to find the best of what's in there?
Yeah.
And focus on that. That's really at the core of this.
And I think too, on this one, part of how I think he's talking about positioning success is, I'm reading between the lines, there's an internal feeling of calm and composure. Like I don't hear him being real restless and jumpy and edgy and bothered. And so I think, go back to this thing of to find the best in others, what a difference that can make. Like if you can take the perspective of, even when you're seeing people like, hey, let's really push this. Let's say that it's peers who are competitors or just being happy for people.
Yeah.
Just being able to take the perspective of like, man, good for them.
Yeah. I mean, think about growth mindset too, right? Principles of growth mindset are not going to be, I'm not going to feel threatened by, let's say, the quote unquote success of somebody else or whatever, but I can appreciate
for sure,
them and the qualities that they have and maybe how they're different from me and so on. I certainly think that's something our world could probably benefit from doing a little bit more of.
Especially when you know how hard something is.
Mm-hmm.
How much it would help you to just find the best in them. Okay, what's our next one?
Yeah, number 8 here, to leave the world a bit better. My only, again, I'm being critical of Ralph, and I know he's your guy, but I just wish it said, I just wish for some of these it just said like to strive to leave the world a bit better, right? So all you can do is, again, like impart some action and behave a certain way and all those things, like taking action to try to improve the world right? But whether or not you personally are moving the needle, again, it probably not up to us.
Can you maybe just try to find the best in Ralph instead?
I am. I've appreciated a lot about Ralph, man.
Yeah. So to leave the world a bit better, Cory, that one makes me think about, I go back to that research from Google on Project Aristotle, and that one of the key findings of the highest performing teams within Google was the element of purpose. And so like, to me, that leaving the world in a bit better is an example of purpose that people could find. And I think we tend to feel certainly more successful if and when we feel like we're living with purpose, and if we're living in a way that's aligned to how we consider and think about purpose. So certainly not like the only way to create purpose, but if you're living in a way, and it sounds like he was, of wanting to make contributions to your universe and the place you find yourself, not just for you.
Yeah, so here, okay, I'm going to give Ralph his flowers. Go back to the original definition. He actually gives examples. He says, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. That I love, right? So he's saying, big, grand, it doesn't matter. A garden patch, plant a garden, you made the world a better place. Right? Like that I think is cool. So he kind of captures the spirit of where I was coming from, more so there by just, it can be really small, but do something intentional to essentially like leave the world a better place than when you found it.
He does make a pretty big leap there from garden patch to redeemed social condition.
Yeah. Well, I was focused on the good, man.
That's a big leap, although both are great. All right. And then let's bring us around third, headed for home here, Cory. We got one last one we want to cover.
Yep. Last one. To know one life has breathed easier because you lived.
That's tough. That's deep.
Yeah. He really
he brings it home strong.
He brought it home.
Garden patch to social redeemed condition to then knowing even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. Which again, like I want to think about that idea relative to there's no way we would ever be able to put our finger on this or know the answer to it. But how many lives have been touched by his work? Mm-hmm. And I think the idea to me of an author defining success by people being touched by his work, and as he said here, even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one to me, I think to leave the world a bit better, again, planting a garden, right, as one of the examples he provided. This one more specifically is about like very deliberately trying to impact people.
Yeah, exactly.
More so than number 8, right? Number 8 is like, hey, I can do a lot of different things to kind of, I pick up some trash on the road and that improves the world. But to deliberately try to make somebody else's life better, just completely selfless. Mm-hmm. From the start, we kind of joked, but like, that's probably the most commendable thing on the list here.
Yeah. Because that's not just legacy. I mean, it is legacy, but there's that term that we've used before that I really love, multi-generational impact, where you've got generations impacting generations. And that's pretty big time. Mm-hmm. I mean,
and to be clear, I guess I described it as like very deliberately trying to impact somebody. That doesn't, in his case, it's like, yes, I'm writing and producing something for whoever wants to consume it. The multi-generational piece is, planting seeds for trees that you'll never see grow.
Yep.
Right. Like that idea is sometimes we don't necessarily see the impact that we have on other people directly, but I think that fits in here well too.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So let's bring this thing kind of around, Cory. And I want to, as we close, even kind of say this is, let's keep in mind what we just went through, what I would consider to be a very well done, articulate, well-developed definition of success from a pretty brilliant guy who wrote a lot.
Yes.
So what we're not trying to do is set a bar that feels overwhelming. That would be the worst thing we could do.
Yeah.
Where do we want people really to kind of go next in terms of an action step, Cory?
I mean, we're always going to encourage people to sit down and try to pen your own definition. And actually, I think the reason why this definition works so well is because within it, at least from our perspective, and the expertise that we're bringing to the conversation, there's sort of a mixed bag here, right? In terms of like, hey, there's a lot that we love about it. There's some pieces there in the middle, as we described, that hey, these things are out of your control. Maybe let's try to steer away from that kind of stuff. Like focus in on the stuff that really you can control. So that's why I think this is such a good example, is because within it, you see some really great stuff. Again, even the pieces that we would argue are probably not the best for how to define your personal success, commendable things but we can learn from my guy Ralph's mistakes, plural, but that's okay.
Yeah.
He was a writer, right? He wasn't, no background as far as I know in psychology.
He got a lot done, though. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Cory. I think for you listening to this podcast, if you have not yet committed the time and the effort to sitting down and working through your definition of success, please do that. Without that, it's so easy to be kind of aimless out there, if we're being honest, or if not aimless, to be living with a moving target when it comes to success, which is really, really tough. It's so hard to live and exist with a moving target of what success means to you.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's the best course of action. Put some thought into it. If you've done it before, then revisit it. Put it under the microscope, make sure that it still sort of applies. I think it's always worthwhile too to say, okay, maybe I have done this exercise. I've got my definition. Well, how do I feel?
Yep. How's it working for me?
Exactly. And again, in my opinion, if you're doing it right, even if you don't feel like you're doing it successfully today, if it's something within your control, guess what? You've got another shot at it tomorrow.
There you go. That's right.
Right.
Okay, so with that, we're going to wrap up for today. I want to just note at the end here, if you do enjoy the Growth Project and if you have found it to be a helpful resource in your life, we greatly appreciate people giving us some feedback and reviews. You can do that through either Apple Podcast or Spotify, depending on what kind of your listening platform is. But please go check us out there. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think, and that will help us to better serve yourself and many others, hopefully for a long time to come. So for Brannon and Cory Shaffer, over and out for today. Thank you.